You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
Victoria Park has been an important public space in East London since it opened in 1845. But today, I'm going to focus on a particular event from April of 1978, Rock Against Racism's Carnival Against the Nazis. The story of that day began about 2 years prior in Birmingham when Eric Clapton, one of the most prominent figures in British rock music, went on a racist tear on stage and offered effuse praise of the right-wing, anti-immigrant politician Enoch Powell. And he proclaimed that Britain was becoming a, quote, black colony. In response to this speech, a group of London-based artists wrote a letter to NME in which they criticized Clapton as, quote, rock music's biggest colonialist, end quote, because of how he incorporated elements of black music. They declared themselves a new collective, Rock Against Racism. RAR, as I will now refer to it, played its first gig as an organization at the Princess Alice pub in Forest Gate in late 1976. This was done in response to a racist street attack against a young Asian man in the district. Its location in Forest Gate was also a key selling point, as RAR sought to draw people from across the city into East London itself, an area rife with racial tension, for an anti-racist concert. RAR grew its audience base through local shows across the city and eventually other British cities as well. The types of music at the show tended to be punk, ska, or reggae, and they eventually incorporated what would become known as new wave music into their rotation as well. The first gigs were relatively small, tended to be done by local bands, but the activity drew attention of some of rock music's biggest names in a variety of ways. RAR teamed up with the Anti-Nazi League, a political organization in London at the time, to generate excitement for a much larger event to draw national attention to the violence faced by East London's growing Asian communities. They called the festival the Carnival Against the Nazis, a reference to the growth of far-right political organizations like the National Front in the East End. The adoption of the word carnival for the event was a deliberate choice by its organizers, a tribute to the West Indian Carnival held annually in West London's Notting Hill. RAR photographer Sid Shelton explained, quote, "We used to give out RAR stickers and sell temporary hoarding, their fanzine, at Notting Hill Carnival. It was a great experience of how multiculturalism worked. That's why we borrowed the word carnival for our own event." The day's events began at Trafalgar Square, where young people from across the nation gathered from coaches and trains. From there, tens of thousands of concertgoers marched through the streets of the City of London and then the East End. The march wound through the National Front heartlands and Spitalfields and Bethnal Green before settling at the Rock Show in Victoria Park, East London's largest public gathering space. Singer and activist Billy Bragg recalls marching past a pub in Bethnal Green where National Front supporters gathered to taunt the marchers. He said, "I saw this little old guy with a pint of beer and a fag on doing a Nazi salute, and we were just jeering at him. I remember thinking, that's him. That's the last of Mosley's black shirts." This was a reference to Oswald Mosley's black shirt fascists who were prominent in the East End in the earlier 20th century. The march was meant to serve as a visible symbol of solidarity with the Asian communities of the East End and was meant to show the organized National Front onlookers that they were widely outnumbered, even amongst members of their own race. Following the march, the rockers gathered in Victoria Park to enjoy an hours-long festival showcasing diverse musical talents. The major acts at the rally included The Clash and Steel Pulse, black and white bands, punk and reggae sharing the stage. Video footage of The Clash's performance of White Riot can still be found on YouTube, and it illustrates that members of the audience of approximately 80,000 were overwhelmingly white. The song, White Riot, which had been inspired by the uprisings in Notting Hill the previous summer, advocated white usage of Black Londoners' experiences as tools to find inspiration for their own anti-establishment struggle. The event was generally viewed in the press as a major success. The music was great, the NF did not manage to cause any incidents, and concertgoers were able to demonstrate high levels of solidarity. It spurred further gatherings of the sort in years to come, including in Brixton, which you can hear about in another Placecast, Manchester, and Leeds. There were some unfortunate ironies to the event, though. The first is quite tragic. Altab Ali, a 25-year-old Bangladeshi Eastender, was murdered in a random act of race-based violence just over a mile from the site of the show, and it happened only 4 days after. The murder spurred greater anti-racist activism across East London, but it certainly reflected the dangers that RAR organizers had hoped to be able to play a part in preventing. The other irony was that RAR's Carnival played at least a small part in gentrifying the areas around Victoria Park. In a series of interviews with the first generation of what we would call gentrifiers in southern Hackney, sociologist Tim Butler asked how the new arrivals found themselves there. One respondent said that he and his friends were shocked about how lovely the area was when they came into the park for the RAR festival. They liked it so much they decided it would be a nice place to try to settle down and set down roots. RAR faded in 1982 as different visions of the future led to the group dissolving, but its legacy of putting together political megashows lived on through the 1980s and 90s. These included shows like the 1986 United Artists Against Apartheid show in Clapham, and the shows at Wembley Stadium in honor of Nelson Mandela in 1988 and 1990.